Chapter 36. Arkies and Okies, early 1930s. Hick, l'extrême unsophisticated rural person. They looked to be Hicks when they came to town. The year 1929 was one for the history books. The year began with the end of the trail for frontiersman and lawman Wyatt Earp, who died in January. Earp served as a lawman in Wichita, Dodge City in Kansas, and then in the Arizona Territory, town of Tombstone. Hollywood made many movies of the cowboy star. The week Wyatt Earp died, Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta and later became a minister and champion of civil rights. Metropolitan America had a sense of everyone getting rich and prosperous in 1929, as Herbert Hoover was inaugurated as the 31st president. Babe Ruth hit his 500th Major League home run as the first transcontinental air transport began flights between NY and LA. It took 48 hours to make the trip at a cost of $310. There was a sense that America could do anything it set its mind to do. On September the 3rd, the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at 381 to 17, which would be the peak of a bull market. The banks that had loaned much money to speculation investors were about to have a financial train wreck. On Bear Creek, the youngest sister of Riley Harness was Martha Orlinia Harness Roberts. She turned 23 years old in May of 1929, being the wife of Herb Roberts. They lived in a house across the creek from her mother Katie and father Billy Harness. The couple had two beautiful girls named Beulah and Helen. Martha was pregnant, and when it came time for her to deliver her child, she was at her mother's house. There were complications with the birth, and young Martha died without delivering her baby. Perry Harness was 4 years old and recalled the event as one of his saddest memories. After Martha passed, the husband and father Herb was sitting on a stump slumped over with Beulah on one knee and Helen on the other. Perry said that seeing Herb hovered over the little girls and weeping bitterly over the loss of a wife and mother was sadder than words could tell. The family buried Martha Roberts and her unborn infant in the Bear Creek Cemetery, where a very simple and rustic tombstone marks her grave next to her father W.A., Billy Harness, and her mother Katie. Perhaps the most difficult experience in life is to bury your child, especially when there are young grandchildren left with no mother, but equally as difficult would be a father losing his wife and having to comfort and take care of his two girls. Around the grave stood the family seeking comfort in the shadow of Alec Harness's grave, and nearby the two young brothers of Melinda's, Floyd and Bethel Turney. All four of them, Ellis, Martha, Floyd, and Bethel, had died before their 25th birthday. Cemeteries throughout the Ozarks give witness to the numerous deaths of the young that departed too early from the afflictions of sickness, the complications of birth, and the violence of war. Very little has been preserved about the short life of Martha, but no records are lost in the everlasting kingdom of God. In many parts of the Midwestern states, too much rain fell in the late 20s. Erosion gutted fields of precious topsoil, and crops suffered from excess water. Much of the land was suffering from loss of fertility, as continuous planting of corn and cotton left it depleted of nutrients. Searcy County had suffered economically ever since the end of WWWI. The 1930 census numbered the population of the county just over 11,000. Most were subsistence farmers living in rural areas without electricity, plumbing, or telephone. Most of the rural roads were just trails that were limited to foot or horse travel. A few cars and trucks were around in Searcy County, but Upper Bear Creek didn't see vehicles except on a rare occasion, as the roads were almost impassable to a car. In September of 1929, the stock market began to make inevitable corrections. The Roaring Twenties were about to come to a screeching halt. Then on October 24th, which would be called Black Thursday, the Dow Jones lost nearly 13% of its value. Investors and banks were in trouble as people began in panic to withdraw their savings. There was a shortage of hard currency to repay debts and to give depositors their cash. Giles Turney's little $600 he had deposited in the bank was not available to him for many months, and then it would only be a fraction of what he had deposited in good faith with them. The new decade came as the 20s then looked like the mess of a city street after a parade. Loss of money immediately meant loss of jobs. Many men did not know how to cope with the hardships they would face in the coming days as the possibility of starvation faced them. Those in city and urban areas had little to fall back on, but those in rural areas could rely again on wild game, and particularly planting turnips in the fall when the drought came. Gathering wild berries, nuts, and roots helped supplement the diet of those who had them available. My father, Earl Harness, said that he remembers foraging the woods with his mother, Melinda, who would tell him they had better find food or they might starve that winter. He later thought it was not that bad, but that she was saying it to make him work harder at finding food. Many families pulled up their roots in the Ozark Hills and migrated to the West Coast in search of employment. Some went to California and others to Oregon or Washington. The orchards and vineyards needed working families to gather their produce. While some of them would return home to the Ozarks, many found a new life out west and never returned. Searcy County lost population in the Great Depression years, and many hill farms were abandoned and grew back up in timber. A great number of folks from Oklahoma and Arkansas went west and were called Arkies and Okies by those who often resented them moving west and taking jobs. As the economy crumbled and currency became more and more scarce, Searcy County and other areas experienced a return to a barter economy. It was an economy that went backward a couple of decades. Riley Harness had periods of time that he said that he had absolutely no hard currency, but they had all they needed to survive. He said they could make do with what they had. His lack of worry and his faith in God helped his family to feel secure in hard times. With the family all home in the winter season, there was a house full. The 1930 census listed these household members: William A. Harness, age 71, Katie Harness, age 67, James R. Harness, age 33, Etta M. Harness, age 28, William E. Harness, age 10, Charles C. Harness, age 8, Daniel T. Harness, age 6, Perry R. Harness, age 4, Veda J. Harness, age 2, Roy A. Harness, age 0. This record showing Roy A. Harness is a clue about the following. Roy was born at the Walt Bohannon place near Atlas. Welcome home. After returning from Oklahoma, where Veda Joe was born, Riley moved his family for a while to Atlas next to Giles Turney's farm. This was due to some conflict Riley and Billy were having over farming the Bear Creek farm. However, Riley was back on the creek by the time the 1930 census was taken. While Riley's family lived next to Giles, A cyclone, strong wind, blew some of the house away, and the boys found a strange-looking bird trapped in the chimney corner in a roll of web wire. They rescued the bird and kept it for a while. Earl said it might have been a pelican. Moving from one place to another seemed to be the way that Riley was managing his family to resolve conflicts and find opportunities. While Grandma Jenny remained in one place on Bear Creek, her children ran about. The old hen still kept a watchful eye on those that she could, but her eyes were fading, and her chicks were multiplying. The matriarch had lived far beyond the days of her contemporaries and knew that each new day was a gift. Reflection. Some very difficult days came to the Harnesses, as it did to many living at that time. The death of Martha and the struggles of Billy and Riley added to the pressures of the Great Depression years. Yet God will preserve a remnant, making them strong in the process of it all. Giles Turney, who lost a great deal of money, would someday find true wealth in God. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. America the Beautiful. Footnote: I reference the Walt Bohannon place where Roy Alexander Harness was born. Walt lived there several years after Riley Harness and his son Earl would refer to the farm by calling it the Walt Bohannon place. When Walt lived there, he planted a vineyard and several fruit trees. Years later, and after Walt moved away, Earl leased the farm to run cattle on. His son Mel would restore the vineyard and grow grapes for market in 1971. Earl liked an apple tree he called a June apple that produced very early, and his wife Emily made naturally colored pink applesauce with the apples. A windstorm one spring tipped the tree over as it was loaded with apples. Earl took his tractor and uprighted the tree and then braced it with some wooden posts. The tree continued to live, being propped upright and supported. One day thereafter, the owner of the farm, Dewey Ward, came along and saw what Dad had done with the tree. As Dewey and Earl talked about how he had uprighted the tree, Earl referred to it as Old Mrs. England. When Dewey heard him say that, he busted out laughing. It was an inside reference that I must explain. The story goes that Mrs. England had a baby boy in her old age whom she called Little Willie. The child was very special, and she treated him more like a grandson. However, Mrs. England died when Willie was very young. In those days when someone died, you washed them down and put them in their bed for viewing, called a wake. Someone had a camera and thought they should get a last picture of mother and child. So they took the stiff corpse of Mrs. England outside and stood her up in the chimney corner of the house. And with a little bit of a backward lean, she stood stiff and remained in place. Then they had little Willie stand next to her for the picture-taking. The apple tree and Mrs. England had something in common, in that both needed to be propped up. You might be surprised to know that this was not an unusual practice with the dead. You can research it under post-mortem photography. The apple tree produced its crop, but failed to live the following year with its props. Earl and Dewey had several good laughs retelling the story of the apple tree Earl called Old Mrs. England.